The letter he never sent. The morning light crept softly through the wide glass window of Keanu's Los Angeles home. The world outside was loud with traffic and the distant hum of a city that never truly rested, but inside his room, there was only silence. He sat alone at a wooden table, a single cup of black coffee growing cold beside him. A letter lay on the table, written, sealed, but never sent. For years, it had stayed in that drawer, untouched, unread by the one person it was meant for. The letter had Sandra's name on it. Keanu stared at it again that morning, the paper slightly wrinkled, the ink faded a little with time. It wasn't love he had written that day, not in the usual way people think of love. It was something quieter, deeper, something he couldn't find the courage to say out loud when she was still there to hear it. He whispered softly to himself, almost as if talking to her ghost. "You deserve to know." The sound of her laughter echoed somewhere in his mind. The way she used to laugh during those long shooting days of Speed, the movie that had changed both their lives. They were young, curious, and full of dreams back then. She had that energy that could light up an entire set, and he had that quiet calm that made everyone around him breathe easier. Together, they became something no one could forget. But what the world never knew was how much they had leaned on each other when the cameras weren't rolling. Back in those days, Sandra was going through something painful, the sudden loss of a close friend. She didn't talk about it often. She just kept showing up, smiling, working. But Keanu had seen the sadness in her eyes. One night, after a long day of shooting, he had brought her a small paper bag with a cupcake inside. On the top was a single candle. He didn't say anything. He just smiled and said, "You deserve a wish." She didn't cry. She just smiled back, the kind of smile that hides tears behind strength. It was the start of something unspoken between them, a bond built on quiet kindness. Years later, after they went their separate ways, they kept that silent connection alive, not through fame or events, but through small gestures that no one saw. A message on birthdays, flowers when one lost someone, a few words that always said more than long conversations could. But then came the year that changed everything. Sandra stepped away from the spotlight for a while, focusing on her family, her children, her peace. Keanu was working far away, filming in the cold hills of Montreal. They hadn't spoken in months, but one day he received a message from her assistant. Sandra wanted to meet him quietly, away from the media. She said it was something important. The day before that meeting, Keanu had written that letter. He had poured his heart into it, memories, gratitude, and one truth he had never told her. Not romantic love, something more sacred, the kind of love that exists between two souls who understand each other beyond words. But that meeting never happened. A week later, he learned she had been admitted to the hospital. Exhaustion, they said. Stress, some reports claimed. But he knew it was more than that. He wanted to visit, but her family asked for privacy. And so he waited, holding that letter in his hands, wishing for one more conversation. Then came the news that broke him quietly. Sandra had passed away. The world mourned a star. But Keanu mourned a friend, someone who had once told him that kindness is the only legacy that really matters. He disappeared from the public eye for months after that. People said he was busy. Others said he was broken. Only a few knew the truth. He had started planning something no one would expect, something she would have smiled at. On a quiet evening, months after her passing, Keanu walked into a small art studio in downtown Los Angeles. He met a sculptor there, an old friend who worked in silence, shaping life out of stone. On the table lay a sketch, the outline of a woman sitting under a tree, holding a book, sunlight falling on her face. "I want to make this real," Keanu said. The sculptor looked up. "Who is she?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Someone who made the world brighter." For weeks, Keanu visited the studio every evening after his shoots. He watched the stone take shape, watched the face emerge, kind, gentle, strong. Every detail reminded him of her. The small curve of her smile, the calm in her expression, the way her hands seemed alive even in stillness. He never told anyone what he was doing. Not his team, not the media. It was his secret tribute. Every night, after the sculptor left, he stayed a few more minutes, brushing the dust off the statue, whispering to it as if it could hear. You once said life isn't about what we own. It's about what we give back. But one night, while he was there alone, a faint sound came from behind him. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, had entered quietly. She worked part-time at the studio, cleaning up after hours. She looked at the sculpture, her eyes wide with awe. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Is it someone you knew?" Keanu hesitated. "Yes," he said after a pause. "She was a good friend." The girl nodded slowly. "It feels like she's smiling at you." Keanu smiled back faintly. She always did. When the sculpture was finished, Keanu didn't want it displayed in a gallery or revealed in a press event. He wanted it somewhere quiet, somewhere that reflected who Sandra truly was, humble, peaceful, full of light. So he arranged for it to be placed in a small garden at a children's hospital in New Orleans, one she had secretly supported for years. He donated it under her name anonymously. No one knew it came from him. The statue was installed on a bright spring morning. The children in the hospital courtyard clapped when they saw it. One little girl, bald from chemotherapy, ran her small hand over the stone face and said, "She looks kind." Keanu stood far in the back, wearing a simple black jacket and sunglasses. No one recognized him. He just watched from a distance, his eyes misty, his heart heavy yet light. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about loss. It was about love. The kind that lives quietly even when words fade, and yet there was one thing he still couldn't let go of. That letter. The one he never sent. That night, after the unveiling, he sat by his window again. The letter was still there on the table. He picked it up, read it one last time, and then walked outside. Under the soft glow of the moon, he lit a candle beside the statue and placed the letter beneath it. "This is where you belong," he whispered. "In the light." The wind moved gently through the leaves, carrying the faint scent of flowers. For a moment he thought he heard her voice, soft, grateful, almost laughing. And for the first time in months he smiled. But he didn't know that the next morning, something unexpected would happen, something that would turn his quiet tribute into a story the world would never forget. And that is where his journey truly began. The discovery. The next morning, the courtyard at the children's hospital was filled with laughter and sunshine. Birds sang in the trees above, and nurses guided little children in wheelchairs toward the garden. The new statue had already become the center of attention. Everyone loved it. Parents stopped to take photos, children smiled, and even the doctors seemed to pause for a few seconds longer than usual. No one knew who had donated it. There was no name on the plaque, no clue of its origin, only a short inscription carved carefully into the stone, "For the light that never fades." By noon, a local nurse named Grace noticed something lying near the base of the statue. It was a half-burned envelope, edges darkened by candle flame, but the name on it was still clear, Sandra. She hesitated. It looked personal. But the wind had carried it slightly away from the candle, and now it rested beneath the flowers placed by the children. She looked around, wondering who had left it there, but saw no one unusual. Finally, she placed it in a small box inside the hospital office, thinking someone might come back for it. But no one did. That evening, one of the volunteers took a few photos of the garden and posted them online with the caption, "A mysterious statue appears at the children's hospital today. No one knows who donated it, but it feels like hope." Within hours, the post went viral. By the next morning, the internet was filled with comments. People called it a tribute of love, a symbol of kindness, a secret message to Sandra Bullock. Fans began connecting clues. Someone noticed that Sandra had supported that very hospital years ago. Another remembered Keanu's visits there during charity drives. Slowly, the puzzle began to form. News outlets picked it up. Headlines appeared. "Mystery statue in New Orleans may honor Sandra Bullock." Reporters began searching for who could have done it. They contacted the hospital, the sculptor, even the city records office. But Keanu had made sure there were no links. No payments under his name, no signature, nothing that could trace it back to him. Still, one small thing escaped his notice. A week later, a reporter named Elena found herself intrigued by the story. She wasn't after gossip or fame. She had covered human stories, moments of compassion that touched lives. Something about this statue felt different to her. She traveled to New Orleans to see it herself. When she arrived, the sky was soft blue and the courtyard was peaceful. Children played around the statue. She noticed how natural it looked there, as if it had always belonged. She knelt near the base and saw the faint mark of ash, maybe from a candle, and a few small wax drips. And then, under the bushes nearby, she saw something white. It was a small piece of paper, torn, faded, but still legible. A few words were visible. "You once said kindness is the only legacy that matters." Her breath caught. Those words sounded like something Keanu Reeves would say, or something he would write. She didn't publish the clue immediately. Instead, she began to research quietly. She looked up interviews, charity projects, old connections between Sandra and Keanu. There were many. The world had always loved their friendship, but few knew the depth behind it. The way they always spoke about each other with respect, never drama. The way they both valued silence over attention. That night, Elena sat in her small hotel room, looking at a photo of the statue on her laptop. Something about it moved her deeply. She couldn't explain it, but she felt the emotion in the stone, as if it held real memories. She whispered to herself, "Whoever made this, did it out of love?" Meanwhile, miles away in Los Angeles, Keanu's phone began to ring. He ignored it. Again and again, his assistant tried to reach him. Finally, after the fifth call, he picked up. "They're talking about it," she said. "About what?" "The statue. The one in New Orleans. It's everywhere." Keanu froze for a moment. He had expected the world to notice eventually, but not this soon, and definitely not this way. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "It doesn't matter," he said quietly. "It's not about me. People think it's your tribute to Sandra." He closed his eyes. There was a long silence before he replied. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." But deep down, he was worried. Not about attention, not about headlines, but about meaning. He had made the tribute to stay pure, private, untouched by fame. If the world turned it into another celebrity story, it would lose its heart. That night, Keanu took a flight to New Orleans. He arrived quietly, without any announcement, dressed simply in jeans and a black jacket. No one recognized him at the hospital gate. He walked straight to the garden, long after sunset. The statue stood under soft lights, surrounded by flowers and small gifts left by visitors, notes, candles, drawings from children. He knelt beside it, brushing off a fallen leaf. "Looks like they found you," he said softly. A nurse passing by stopped when she noticed him. She didn't realize who he was, only that he looked familiar and gentle. "You here to see the statue?" she asked kindly. Keanu smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said. "She meant a lot to me." The nurse nodded, not pressing further. "People say whoever made it must have loved her very much." Keanu's eyes softened. They did. For a while, he just sat there, watching the light flicker across the stone face. The hospital garden was quiet except for the sound of the wind moving through the trees. And then from somewhere nearby, a child's voice said, "Mister?" He turned. It was the little girl who had touched the statue that first day. She walked up to him, holding a drawing in her hand. "Did you make this, lady?" she asked, pointing to the statue. Keanu hesitated, then smiled. "No," he said softly. "But I helped someone who did." The girl smiled, holding out her picture. It was a colorful crayon sketch of the statue with a big sun behind it. "She makes me happy," the girl said. "I talk to her when I'm scared." Keanu's throat tightened. He took a slow breath before answering. That's what she would have wanted. After the girl left, he looked back at the statue. And for a moment he saw something that made his heart stop. A small folded paper tucked behind the flowers. He reached for it and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 words written in childish handwriting. "Thank you, mister." The words hit him harder than he expected. He sat there for a long time, the paper in his hand, the night silent around him. It was then he realized the tribute had already become something greater than he imagined. It wasn't just about Sandra anymore. It was about what she stood for. Kindness, compassion, quiet strength. But what he didn't know was that Elena, the journalist, had arrived at the hospital that same night. She saw him sitting there under the lights, his face partially hidden, the wind moving his hair gently. She took a single photo from afar, not for gossip, but because something in that moment felt sacred. The next morning, that photo appeared online. She didn't reveal his name. She simply wrote, "A man came to see the statue last night. He sat there for an hour in silence. Whoever he was, he looked at it like it meant everything." And the world began to wonder even more. By evening, the sculptor received a message. It was from an anonymous email, short and simple. "Thank you for helping me honor her. I never wanted it to be known, but maybe it's time people remember why she mattered." The sculptor smiled, understanding exactly who had written it. In Los Angeles, Keanu returned home and placed a small photograph of Sandra beside the candle on his desk. He whispered, "Looks like your light's spreading again." But what he didn't expect, what would soon shake him deeply, was that Sandra's family had seen the news too. And they wanted to meet him not for a statement, but for something else, something that would change the meaning of his tribute forever. The wish she left behind. The sun was beginning to set over Los Angeles when Keanu received the message. It came quietly through an email from an unknown address. The subject line was simple. "She wanted you to know." For a long time, he didn't open it. He just stared at the screen, his heart heavy with the kind of feeling that has no name. Finally, as the room filled with orange light from the evening sun, he clicked. The message read, "Dear Keanu, this is from Sandra's sister, Georgina. I saw the photo of the statue. I don't need to ask if it was you. I just know. There's something she left behind for you. Something she wrote a few months before she passed. If you're willing, I'd like you to come see it." For a while, he just sat there reading the message again and again. Then he closed his laptop, stood slowly, and walked to the window. Outside, the city looked peaceful. But inside, his chest felt tight. Like time itself had folded back and brought all the memories rushing in. The next day, he flew quietly to a small town in Georgia where Sandra's sister lived. There were no cameras, no news crews, no red carpets, just a quiet road surrounded by tall pine trees. He rented a small car and drove until the GPS told him to stop. A small white house stood at the end of the lane. The garden was full of flowers, wild ones, untamed and bright. When Georgina opened the door, her eyes were kind but tired. She looked like someone who had seen too much sadness and learned to carry it with grace. "You came," she said softly. Keanu nodded. "I didn't know if I should." "She'd want you to." Inside, the house smelled like old books and lavender. On a wooden shelf near the window was a framed photo, Sandra laughing, holding a puppy. Beside it was another frame, her and Keanu during the Speed premiere. He smiled faintly, remembering that day, how nervous they both were and how she had whispered, "Just smile. It'll be fine." Georgina brought out a small wooden box. "She left this in her will," she said. "She said if you ever came to visit, I should give it to you." Keanu looked at the box for a long moment before opening it. Inside were a few things: a folded letter, a pendant with a tiny heart engraved, and a small notebook filled with handwriting. He picked up the letter first. The paper was soft. The ink faded in places. "Dear Keanu, you once told me that kindness is a light that never fades. I didn't understand it back then, not fully. But as the years went on, I saw it in you, in how you treated people, in the quiet things you did when no one was watching. I don't know if I ever told you this, but you changed how I see the world. When I started my foundation for the Children's Hospital, I wrote a promise on the first page of my journal that I would build something that would last longer than my name. I guess I never finished it. Maybe you can help me keep that promise. If you ever read this, it means I'm gone. But I hope you're still out there making the world gentle again, with love, always. Sandy." As he read the words, Keanu's eyes grew wet. Not from grief this time, but from something deeper. A mixture of gratitude and pain and love that words could never describe. He looked at the notebook next. The pages were filled with sketches, drawings of gardens, playgrounds, hospital rooms with sunlight streaming through windows. Each page had little notes written in her neat handwriting. A place for children to dream. A garden of peace. Art that heals. And at the very end, the last page had just one line written. Tell him the story isn't over yet. Keanu closed the notebook gently. He looked up at Georgina, who was watching him quietly. She wanted to build something, he said softly. Georgina nodded. She talked about it often, especially in her last year. She said if she couldn't finish it, maybe you'd understand how to. He sat in silence for a while, staring at the pages spread before him. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, She already built it. I just have to give it a heartbeat. Over the next few days, Keanu stayed in town, visiting places Sandra had once supported, schools, small shelters, libraries. Everywhere he went, people spoke about her kindness. Not her fame, not her movies, and just her quiet gestures. One teacher told him, She used to visit us secretly and read stories to the kids. She didn't want anyone to know. She said smiles don't need cameras. Those words stayed with him. One evening, as he sat by the river that ran behind the town, Keanu opened the pendant from the box. Inside was a tiny folded paper. On it, just 3 words were written. Keep her promise. And in that moment, he understood what he had to do. The next morning, he made a call to an old friend, an architect he had worked with during charity events. He explained the idea slowly, carefully, his voice steady but full of quiet emotion. I want to build a place, he said, a sanctuary for children, not just treatment but hope, a place filled with her spirit. The architect paused. What will you call it? Keanu looked out the window at the sunrise. The light she left. Plans began immediately. He funded it anonymously, refusing to attach his name. He wanted it to stay true to her wish, humble, kind, lasting. The sanctuary would be a small but beautiful place where children could paint, read, and dream. Months passed quietly. Construction began. Each brick laid felt like healing. The local workers didn't know who funded it, only that it came with instructions written in gentle handwriting. Make it peaceful, make it kind. But even as he worked in silence, the world outside buzzed louder. News of the mystery statue and the unnamed donor continued to spread. Now, people began linking it to this new children's project, too. The internet called it the kindness chain. But Keanu stayed silent. One evening, Georgina called him. Her voice trembled slightly. I think you should know, she said. Sandra's son found something else in her old files. Another letter. It's addressed to you, but it was written years ago, long before she got sick. Keanu flew back immediately. The second letter was simpler, shorter, written in the margin of a script. You once said you wished we could do another film together. Maybe life will find a way. If not here, maybe in another time. Promise me one thing, never stop creating light. People need it even when they don't say it. He read it in silence, then smiled through the tears. She never really stopped teaching me, he said. By the end of that year, the sanctuary was finished. Children ran through its gardens, laughter echoing through the air. Paintings lined the walls, bright, messy, full of life. In the center of the courtyard stood a fountain, and beside it, a small plaque with her name, in memory of Sandra Bullock, who believed kindness could heal. On the day of the opening, Keanu stood far away from the cameras again. He watched quietly as Georgina cut the ribbon, her eyes shining. Children played with bubbles around the garden, and as one bubble floated up toward the sky, catching the sunlight, he whispered softly, You did it, Sandy. You really did. But as peaceful as it seemed, fate had one more turn waiting. A few days after the opening, Elena, the journalist, reached out again. She said she had found something surprising while investigating the sculpture's origin. She wanted to meet Keanu in person. When they met in a quiet cafe, she placed a small file on the table. There's something you should see, she said. It's about the statue. He opened the file and froze. Inside were photographs of the sculpture's blueprint, sketches, and a handwritten note that wasn't his. It was Sandra's. "If anything ever happens to me, let him finish it." "He'll know what it means." Keanu's hands trembled as he held the paper. The world around him seemed to blur. She had planned it, years ago. The statue. The same design he had given to the sculptor. "How did you find this?" he asked softly. Elena smiled faintly. "It was in her charity archives. No one noticed it before. I think she always knew you'd make it real someday." For a long moment, he couldn't speak. He just sat there, the letter in his hand, the weight of everything sinking in. It wasn't his tribute alone. It had always been theirs. And that realization changed everything. He looked up, tears in his eyes, and said quietly, "Then the story really isn't over yet." The truth he could no longer hide. The rain had just started when Keanu stepped out of the cafe, holding the file Elena had given him. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, and the sound of thunder rolled softly in the distance. It felt as if the heavens themselves were listening. He stood still under the awning, the paper pressed to his chest. Sandra's handwriting, the same familiar curves, the same calm confidence, was right there before him. She had designed the statue. She had imagined it long before he ever thought of building it. And somehow, through grief and memory, he had brought her vision to life without even knowing it. It wasn't his tribute anymore. It was her unfinished dream. He walked back to his car, sat quietly for a long time, and finally whispered, "You were still guiding me, weren't you?" The city lights flickered through the rain on his windshield. People passed by without recognizing him. Just another man sitting alone, holding on to something precious that no one else could understand. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her last letter. Tell him the story isn't over yet. He now understood what that meant. The story wasn't just about loss or tribute. It was about passing the light forward, about letting others see what kindness could really do when it came from a pure heart. For years, he had avoided attention. He hated being in the center of things. He believed silence was stronger than speeches. But now something inside him shifted. Maybe, he thought, it was time to speak. Not for himself, but for her. The next morning, he called Elena. "You still writing?" he asked. "Always," she said. "Then help me tell the truth. All of it." She was silent for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Once this is out, it can't go back." Keanu smiled faintly. "It was never mine to keep." A week later, the world woke up to an article titled, "The Light She Left," the story behind the statue. It began with Sandra's sketch, her vision, and her promise. It told how she had dreamed of creating art that healed, of giving hope where it was needed most. Then it spoke about how years later, without knowing her full plan, Keanu had built her dream into reality. The article was quiet, respectful, and deeply human. No gossip, no sensational words, just truth wrapped in emotion. By noon, it spread across the world. Millions shared it. Fans cried. Strangers left flowers by the statue. Schools read her words aloud. Hospitals shared the story with their patients. Social media was full of messages like, "This is how love should look," and "They taught us that kindness never dies." For the first time, Keanu read the comments not as noise, but as connection. He didn't reply to any, but every message that mentioned Sandra's kindness made him smile softly. In one interview request, a reporter asked if he would speak publicly about it. He refused all offers except one, a small live talk at a local children's charity event. Not a glamorous stage, not a TV show, just a quiet place filled with people who understood what compassion meant. The night of the event, the hall was warm and softly lit. Families sat close together. Children laughed in the front row. On the stage stood a single wooden chair and a microphone. No bright lights, no introductions. Keanu walked out slowly, dressed simply in black. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, and sincere. "This isn't a story about me," he began. "It's about someone who believed in light, and how even after she was gone, that light kept finding ways to shine." The audience grew silent. "Years ago," he continued, "I met someone who taught me that fame doesn't matter. That what we leave behind isn't in our awards or our headlines, but in how we make people feel. She lived that truth every single day. And when she left us, she left behind something far greater than her movies. She left a map of kindness. I only followed it. He paused, looking around at the children's faces. The statue you've seen, the stories you've read, they belong to her. Not to Hollywood, not to news feeds, but to every person who still believes that small acts of love can heal big things. He smiled faintly then. She was right. Kindness really is the only legacy that matters. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then a child stood up and clapped. Another followed. Soon, the entire hall was echoing with applause, not the loud kind, but the heartfelt kind that carries gratitude. After the event, people didn't rush to take photos or ask for autographs. They simply came up to thank him, some with tears in their eyes, others with quiet smiles. One woman whispered, "I lost my sister too." "Your words helped me breathe again." Keanu nodded softly. "Then her light reached you too." That night he went back to his hotel room and opened his phone. Thousands of messages flooded in, but one caught his eye. From Georgina, Sandra's sister. "You did exactly what she wanted. Thank you for letting the world see her the way she truly was." He typed back, "She's still here," in every heart she touched. Then he set the phone down and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. In their glow, he felt her presence, calm, proud, smiling. The next morning, he visited the statue once more. The garden was full of people leaving flowers, drawings, even small notes of thanks. But this time, something new had been added. At the base of the statue, a small metal plate had been installed. It read, "This was her dream, carried by his heart." Together, they reminded us to be kind. Keanu touched the plate gently, his eyes misty. "You see?" he whispered softly. "They understand now." He sat by the statue for a while, lost in thought. Then he noticed an elderly woman sitting on a nearby bench holding a book. She smiled at him and said, "Beautiful, isn't it?" "It is," he replied. "I used to watch her films," the woman said. "She made me laugh when my husband was sick. And you made me believe kindness still exists." Keanu didn't know what to say. He just smiled, grateful. The woman closed her book. "People come and go, dear. But goodness stays forever. Thank you for keeping hers alive." After she left, Keanu whispered quietly to the statue, "You're still healing people, Sandy. But fate, as it often does, wasn't done yet." Weeks later, Elena called him again. Her voice carried something unusual. Not sadness, not fear, but wonder. "Keanu," she said softly, "you need to see this." She sent him a video clip. It showed a young boy from the hospital, one who had lost his leg in an accident, standing with the help of a small prosthetic. He was smiling, holding a crayon drawing of the statue. The caption read, "She makes me brave." Beneath it, 1,000 comments followed. People sharing their own stories of kindness, people helping strangers, people donating to hospitals and shelters in Sandra's name. And it all began because one man decided to act on a memory instead of letting it fade. Keanu watched the clip in silence, his eyes full. Then he smiled and whispered, "You did it, Sandy." The light is everywhere now. He thought it would end there, the tribute complete. Her legacy alive, but the world had one more surprise waiting, because a month later, he received an invitation from the Academy, not for a film award, but for a humanitarian honor. And the name on the award wasn't just his. It read, "Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock for inspiring kindness through art and action." The night the world stood still, the evening of the ceremony arrived quietly, though the world waited for it loudly. For days, people had been talking about the special award, a recognition not for acting, not for fame, but for humanity. The humanitarian honor for kindness in art and action. What made it special was that the names engraved on it were two, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. The Academy Hall glowed softly that night. The audience was full of familiar faces, actors, directors, dreamers. Yet there was a calmness in the air that felt different from other award nights. The golden lights reflected off the polished floor and soft music played in the background. It wasn't about applause tonight. It was about remembrance. Keanu arrived quietly as always, dressed in a simple black suit. His hair fell gently around his shoulders, his expression humble. Photographers called out. Lights flashed, but he only smiled politely. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to honor. When he took his seat, a large screen behind the stage began to glow. The host walked up to the microphone and said softly, "Tonight, we celebrate two people whose friendship reminded the world what true kindness looks like, both on and off the screen." A soft murmur ran through the hall. Then the lights dimmed and a tribute video began to play. Clips of Sandra appeared, her laughter on set, her gentle hugs with fans, her moments with children at hospitals. Her words filled the room. "We all have the power to make someone's day better. Use it." Then the footage shifted, clips of Keanu helping crew members, signing autographs quietly, talking kindly to strangers. A voiceover followed. "Kindness isn't an act for them, it's a language." As the screen faded to black, the audience stood in silence. Some clapped softly, others wiped their eyes. When the host called his name, Keanu walked slowly to the stage. The applause that followed wasn't wild or thunderous. It was deep and heartfelt, rising like a quiet wave of respect. He stood at the podium, his eyes glistening under the lights. The golden award gleamed in his hand, but his gaze was far away, as if searching for her among the stars. After a long pause, he began. "Thank you," he said softly. "But this isn't mine." It never was. His voice echoed gently in the silent hall. "Years ago, I met someone who changed how I see everything. She taught me that kindness doesn't need a reason, that sometimes the smallest things, a smile, a word, a quiet act, can change someone's whole world." That person was Sandra. The crowd listened, motionless. We worked together. We laughed together. We shared dreams we never spoke about. She believed art could heal. She believed people could too. And when she left us, I thought her story was over. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. But I was wrong. Her story kept writing itself through every act of love she inspired, through every life she touched. He looked down at the statue-shaped award in his hand. "This isn't an award, it's a promise, and I'm here to keep it." He reached into his jacket and took out a small folded paper, Sandra's last note. "This was the last thing she ever wrote to me," he said softly. "It said, 'The story isn't over yet, and I finally understand what she meant.'" He took a deep breath. "Tonight I'm announcing something she dreamed of, and that I promised to finish. It's called the Light She Left Foundation. It will support schools, hospitals, and children's art centers around the world, places where hope begins." Gasps and soft claps filled the air. Cameras flashed, but Keanu wasn't looking at them. He was looking up, as if speaking to her directly. "Sandy," he whispered, barely audible but caught by the microphone. "We did it." The audience rose to their feet. The applause this time wasn't just sound, it was emotion. Tears, smiles, pride, all blended together. People hugged. Some whispered her name. And for a brief moment, the entire hall felt united by one thing: love. As he stepped down from the stage, several actors reached out to shake his hand. One of them, an older woman, said softly, "You made us remember what this industry is supposed to be about." He smiled humbly. "She made me remember." After the ceremony, he didn't go to the after-party. Instead, he drove quietly to the coast. The night was calm, the ocean whispering against the shore. He walked barefoot on the sand, holding the award in one hand and the folded letter in the other. The moon hung low, silver and bright. He knelt near the water, set the award down gently, and opened the letter again, reading the words he had memorized but could never forget. Then, he tore a small piece of it, the line that said, "The story isn't over yet." He folded it neatly, placed it inside a small glass bottle, and threw it into the sea. "Go where kindness is needed," he whispered. Let it travel. The waves took the bottle, carrying it gently into the distance until it disappeared beneath the moonlight. For a long time he stayed there, quiet, peaceful, and full. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from Elena. People around the world are donating to the foundation. Within a few hours, it's already helped 3 hospitals and 2 schools. The light is spreading. Keanu smiled softly, looking at the horizon. That's her, he whispered. She's still working. A week later, in New Orleans, the statue garden at the hospital was filled with visitors again. But this time there was something new beside the sculpture. A small plaque with fresh engraving. It had been added overnight anonymously. It read, For every hand that helps, for every heart that heals, you carry her light. No one knew who placed it there. But everyone who saw it felt peace. A few days after that, one of the hospital children, the little girl with the crayons, sent a letter to the foundation. Her handwriting was messy but full of love. Dear Mr. Keanu, thank you for making the statue of the lady who helps us feel brave. I am painting again now. I will be nice like her when I grow up. I think you both are angels. Keanu read the letter sitting on his porch, the evening light soft on his face. He didn't cry this time. He smiled, quietly, like someone who had found his place in the world again. And as he looked at the setting sun, he whispered the same words he had said years ago to Sandra on the speed set, when the camera stopped rolling and laughter filled the air. You were right, he said softly. Kindness really is forever. But fate still had one more gift left for him. One that would come unexpectedly, from a place he least imagined. Something waiting to close the circle completely. The last scene she left for him, it had been 6 months since the night of the ceremony. The foundation had grown beyond anything Keanu imagined. Schools from India to Brazil carried Sandra's name. Hospitals displayed her quote, kindness is the light that never fades. Everywhere, people were doing small good things inspired by their story. Strangers helping strangers. Fans turning admiration into action. And through it all, Keanu stayed quiet. He didn't do interviews. He didn't speak about awards. He just kept working, visiting the hospitals, sitting with children, planting trees in her honor. It was his way of keeping her close. One peaceful morning, he sat on his porch, reading a small notebook from the foundation's director. It listed their next project and a new art therapy center in a small town outside Austin, Texas. He smiled softly. That was Sandra's home state. It felt right. Then his phone buzzed. It was Elena again. Her message was short. You need to come to Austin. I found something. When he arrived 2 days later, she was waiting in an old studio building on the outskirts of the city. Dust floated through the sunlight coming from high windows. Rolls of film and old movie props were scattered around. It looked like a place frozen in time. What is this? Keanu asked softly. This, she said, was Sandra's private workspace. She used it for writing and filming test scenes for her dream project. No one's been here since she passed. Elena walked him toward an old projector. Beside it was a metal box labeled unfinished. I was cataloging her archives for the foundation, she explained, and found this reel. It's dated 3 years before she got sick. You might want to see it. She turned on the projector. The screen flickered to life. Grainy images appeared. A set with a bench, soft lighting, and Sandra sitting quietly, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans. She looked calm, radiant, and happy. Then, she began to speak directly to the camera. If you're watching this, she said with a gentle smile, it means I didn't get to finish this film, but maybe someone else will. Someone who understands why I wanted to make it. Her voice trembled slightly. It's about 2 souls, friends, maybe more, who never said what they felt. They go through life helping others, never realizing that their kindness to the world was their message to each other. She paused, looking off camera for a moment, then back. Maybe I'm talking to you, Keanu, she said softly. You always said life is like a scene that keeps playing even when we walk off set. I think you were right. The camera shook a little as if she had laughed. If you ever find this, promise me something. Finish it. Not as a movie, as a memory. Then the screen went dark. Keanu stood still, not moving, not breathing for a long time. The sound of the projector clicking filled the silence like a heartbeat. "She recorded that for me," he whispered finally. Elena nodded, her voice soft. "It was labeled for Kay." He walked toward the screen, touching the faint light as her image faded. His eyes glistened. She was saying goodbye, but also hello. That night, Keanu stayed in the studio long after Elena left. He found her old notebooks, scripts, drawings. On the last page of one script, she had written, "Make it real. Not for the screen, for life." He smiled through his tears. He knew what he had to do. Over the next few months, he worked quietly with a small team, not a movie studio, not a production company, just a group of passionate young filmmakers who had grown up admiring Sandra's work. He told them, "We're not making a film. We're finishing a message." The project was called Forever Seen. It wasn't a drama or a romance. It was a gentle short film about kindness, loss, and hope, told through letters, moments, and silence. It had no big stars, no fancy effects, just truth. Keanu didn't play himself. He played a man carrying a letter for someone he missed, a letter he never sent. The scene mirrored his own life so closely that the crew often had tears in their eyes while filming. When the short was finished, he uploaded it online for free, with no promotion, no sponsors, no premiere. The video simply began with a line on a black screen. For Sandy, the story isn't over yet. Within 24 hours, it reached millions. People all around the world cried, shared, and wrote messages like, "This feels like she's still here." Teachers used it in classrooms. Hospitals played it in waiting rooms. People started writing letters to those they had lost, not to say goodbye, but to say thank you. The project became a global movement called Letters of Light, and every letter sent through the foundation was stored in a digital archive, a living tribute to kindness. Keanu called it the world's book of gentle souls. Months later, he returned once more to the Children's Hospital in New Orleans. The garden was brighter than ever. The statue stood tall under the sun, flowers blooming at its base. Children played around it, laughter echoing. A nurse saw him and smiled. "It's beautiful how it's still bringing people together," she said. He nodded. That's what she wanted. He placed a small silver pendant, the one from her sister's box, at the statue's base. He whispered, "I kept your promise, Sandy. And I think you kept mine." He stepped back and looked at the faces of the children. One boy ran up, holding a camera, and said, "Mr. Keanu, can I take your picture with her statue?" He smiled. "Sure, but only if you promise to smile, too." The boy grinned wide, clicked the photo, and said, "I'll show everyone that kindness looks like this." Keanu laughed softly. "That's the best picture ever taken." As the sun began to set, he sat quietly on the garden bench, watching the golden light dance on the statue's face. It almost felt like she was there beside him, smiling the same gentle smile she always did. The wind moved softly through the trees like a whisper. "You see," he said softly to the air, "you never really left." A single leaf fell onto his lap, golden and warm in the sunlight. He held it gently between his fingers, smiled, and whispered, "Good night, Sandy. The light will keep shining." In the months that followed, the Light She Left Foundation became one of the most meaningful global charities. Every year, on Sandra's birthday, millions of people around the world performed acts of kindness, feeding the poor, donating to schools, helping strangers. It became known as the Day of Gentle Light. Keanu never claimed credit, he said once in a rare interview. "It was her story. I was just lucky enough to finish a few of her sentences." And when asked what he learned from it all, he said simply, that love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes art, sometimes a smile, sometimes a statue in a garden where children heal, but it always finds its way back, if your heart stays kind. And somewhere, beyond time and space, in that soft light where memories and dreams meet, Sandra smiled. The same calm, gentle smile that once said everything words couldn't. Their story was complete. Not with goodbye, but with forever.